Virginia Wilson, 68, had built a comfortable life in her paid-off family home after decades of hard work. When her daughter Samantha Montgomery, 42, invited her to a birthday lunch at Le Bistro, Virginia was thrilled despite her mild arthritis flaring up that morning. She applied her favorite coral lipstick, wore her best blue dress, and arrived with a thoughtfully wrapped gift. I never imagined my own daughter would use her birthday to try to strip away my independence and dignity with a glass of champagne in her hand and a false smile on her face. Where are you watching from today? I would love to know which corner of the world my story has reached. Before I continue sharing how I stood up to my daughter's shocking betrayal, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, what happened next will show you exactly why we must protect ourselves, even from those we love most. I suppose to understand how we reached that terrible moment at Le Bistro, you need to know our history. I became a widow 27 years ago when my husband Frank suffered a sudden heart attack. Samantha was only 12 then, a bright-eyed girl with her father's smile and my determination. The loss devastated us both, but life offers no pause button for grief when bills need paying and children need raising. Our suburban home in Oak Ridge felt emptier without Frank, but I was determined to keep it as Samantha's stable foundation. I threw myself into working as an elementary school teacher by day, while weekends were spent doing bookkeeping for local businesses. Those years blur together in my memory now, endless stacks of papers to grade and ledgers to balance, all while trying to attend Samantha's soccer games and school plays. "Mom, you work too hard," teenage Samantha would complain, not understanding that the alternative was losing our home. My parents had taught me the value of financial independence, so despite the exhaustion, I made our mortgage payments faithfully every month. I packed lunch instead of buying it, learned to repair rather than replace, and postponed my own dreams of traveling. Every sacrifice seemed worthwhile when Samantha graduated high school with honors and earned a partial scholarship to State University. That scholarship only covered half the tuition, of course. I still remember sitting at our kitchen table, calculator in hand, realizing that even with my savings, we couldn't make it work. The next day, I applied for a second mortgage on our home. When I signed those papers, I felt Frank would have approved. Education was our shared value. "This is your future," I told Samantha as we toured the campus together. "Make it count." And she did. Samantha graduated with a business degree and quickly found a position at a marketing firm. She met Wesley Montgomery at a corporate retreat 3 years later. He was handsome, ambitious, and came from a wealthy family. Their wedding was lavish, with his parents covering most expenses, though I insisted on purchasing her dress, a gorgeous satin gown that cost 3 months of my salary. The early years of their marriage seemed happy. Wesley's career in investment banking flourished, and Samantha eventually became marketing director at her firm. They welcomed Tyler, now 15, and Haley, now 13. I transitioned to part-time teaching to help with childcare, saving them thousands in daycare costs. When they announced they'd found their dream home 3 years ago, a 5-bedroom colonial in Maple Hills Estates, I was surprised by its grandeur but happy for their success. Then came the unexpected request. "Mom, we need a cosigner for the mortgage," Samantha explained over coffee. "Just temporarily, until Wesley's year-end bonus comes through." I hesitated, remembering my father's warning never to mix family and finances. But Samantha described how the sellers were entertaining multiple offers, how the school district was perfect for the children, how they might lose their chance at the perfect home. "We'd also need help with the down payment," Wesley added casually. "Just a loan until things stabilize." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I withdrew $50,000 from my retirement fund, paying the penalty for early withdrawal, and signed the mortgage documents as cosigner. Wesley assured me they would refinance within 6 months to remove my name. That never happened. Meanwhile, I finally paid off my own mortgage last year, celebrating quietly with a glass of wine on my back porch. 67 years old and finally owning my home outright felt like an achievement worth savoring. I'd begun experiencing some health issues by then, nothing severe but noticeable. Arthritis in my hands made grading papers more difficult, leading to my reluctant retirement from teaching. Occasionally, I'd forget small things like where I'd placed my reading glasses or the name of a new neighbor. "Mom, that's the 3rd time you've told me that story," Samantha remarked during one Sunday dinner at their house. She exchanged glances with Wesley, a look I couldn't quite interpret. My relationship with my grandchildren remained my greatest joy. Tyler inherited my love of books and would often discuss his latest reads with me. Haley and I shared a creative streak, spending hours on art projects in my sunroom. Their visits brightened my weeks, though recently Samantha had been finding reasons to cancel our planned times together. The kids have too many activities, she'd explain. Maybe next weekend. I noticed other changes in Samantha's behavior toward me. She began questioning my housekeeping, pointing out dust on bookshelves or expired items in my refrigerator. Wesley started making comments about my driving, suggesting it might be time to give up the keys. Their concerns seemed disproportionate to any actual decline in my abilities. My friend Eleanor Davis, whom I've known since our teaching days, was the first to warn me. We were having our weekly lunch at the local diner when she hesitated over her club sandwich. "Virginia, I overheard something at my doctor's office yesterday," she said carefully. Samantha was there, talking to Dr. Phillips' receptionist about elder care facilities. She specifically mentioned you. I dismissed her concern initially. She probably meant it generally. You know Samantha likes to plan ahead. Eleanor wasn't convinced. "Just be careful, Virginia. I've seen this before with my sister's children. Once they start seeing parents as financial assets rather than people, things can change quickly." I should have listened more carefully to Eleanor's warning. Instead, I made excuses for my daughter's behavior, attributing her critical comments to stress from her job or temporary financial worries. After all, this was my Samantha, the little girl who once made me handprint cards for Mother's Day, the teenager who cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, the young woman who thanked me in her college graduation speech. How could I have known that behind her increasingly frequent inquiries about my will and insurance policies lurked a plan to take everything I'd worked for? The invitation to Samantha's birthday lunch arrived via text message, rather than her usual phone call. "Le Bistro at noon Saturday. Wesley's treating everyone. Dress nice." The brevity struck me as odd, but I attributed it to her busy schedule. I selected a gift with care, a vintage brooch that had belonged to my mother, wrapped in silver paper with a handwritten card expressing my love and pride. Le Bistro occupied the renovated ground floor of what had once been the town's bank building. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and white tablecloths covered each table. I arrived precisely at noon, my blue dress freshly pressed, hair neatly styled. Wesley spotted me first, raising his hand from a round table near the windows. "Virginia, over here." The gathering was larger than I'd expected. Samantha sat beside Wesley, wearing a red dress I hadn't seen before. Tyler and Haley occupied chairs to her right, both looking uncomfortable in their formal attire. Two of Samantha's friends, Rebecca Winters and Jennifer Klein, completed the circle. I noticed an empty chair between Jennifer and Tyler, obviously meant for me. "Mom, you made it," Samantha said, her tone suggesting surprise, though I'd never been late to any event in my life. Wesley stood to pull out my chair. "You're looking comfortable today, Virginia." I settled into my seat, placing Samantha's gift on the table. "Happy birthday, dear. 42 is a wonderful age." "It's 43, Mom," Samantha corrected, though I knew perfectly well she was turning 42. "Remember? We celebrated my 42nd last year at Giovanni's." "That was my work anniversary dinner," she continued before I could respond. "We went to Riverfront Grill for my birthday last year." Tyler caught my eye briefly, a silent confirmation that I was correct. But I let it pass, unwilling to create tension at her celebration. The server appeared with menus, and conversation shifted to meal selections. "I chose the salmon, though Wesley suggested the chicken might be easier for you to manage, Virginia." As appetizers arrived, Samantha regaled the table with stories from work, then turned to reminiscing about family vacations. "Remember that summer in Cape Cod when I was 10? Mom got us completely lost trying to find that lighthouse." "That was actually Cape May," I said gently. "And we weren't lost. The road was closed for construction, so we had to take the scenic route." "Mom, it was definitely Cape Cod," Samantha insisted, her voice carrying an edge. "You're mixing it up with another trip." Rebecca looked uncomfortable. "Memory is funny that way. My mother and I always disagree about family stories too. Wesley jumped in. Speaking of memory issues, did you all read that article about seniors and cognitive decline? Fascinating stuff. They say early intervention is key. Jennifer nodded. My father-in-law resisted moving to assisted living for years. When they finally convinced him, he adjusted beautifully. Says he wishes he'd done it sooner. Supervision is so important at a certain age, Wesley continued, swirling his wine glass. Independence is great until it becomes a safety issue. I felt a growing unease as I picked at my salad. The conversation had an orchestrated quality, as if following a script. Haley stared at her plate, unusually quiet. Tyler kept glancing between his parents and me with a furrowed brow. When our main courses arrived, Wesley ordered champagne. We need to properly toast the birthday girl. The server returned with flutes and poured the bubbling liquid for everyone except the children, who received sparkling cider. Wesley raised his glass first. To my beautiful wife on her birthday. Your drive and ambition continue to inspire me every day. Rebecca went next. To Samantha, the most organized friend anyone could ask for. May this year bring you everything you're planning for. The toasts continued around the table, until only I remained. As I prepared to speak, Samantha unexpectedly stood and raised her glass higher. I'd like to make one more toast, she announced, her eyes not quite meeting mine. To the woman who raised me, but now needs a corner in a nursing home where she can get the proper care she deserves. The table fell silent. Jennifer's mouth opened slightly in shock. Tyler set his glass down with excessive force, causing cider to slosh onto the tablecloth. Mom, Haley whispered urgently. I remained perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. Decades of classroom management had taught me to control my expressions even when blindsided. Inside, however, I felt as if I'd been struck. The room seemed to tilt momentarily, the chandelier lights too bright. I've been researching facilities, Samantha continued into the silence, her voice now honeyed with false concern. Sunny Meadows has an excellent memory care unit. They have an opening next month that would be perfect. Samantha, perhaps this isn't the best venue for this discussion, Rebecca suggested quietly. Wesley placed his hand over Samantha's. We're just concerned about your well-being, Virginia. Living alone at your age isn't ideal. I took a deliberate sip of water, then placed the glass precisely on its coaster. Thank you for your concern, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But I'm quite capable of managing my own living arrangements. Mom, you forgot your doctor's appointment last week, Samantha pressed. And Eleanor mentioned you left the stove on overnight recently. That was an outright lie. I had rescheduled the appointment with proper notice, and I hadn't used my stove for anything more complex than boiling water in months, preferring my microwave for simplicity. The remainder of the lunch proceeded in excruciating politeness. I declined dessert, citing a non-existent afternoon commitment. When the check arrived, I attempted to contribute, but Wesley waved away my offer. Our treat, Virginia. Consider it an early gift for your cooperation with our plans. I retrieved my purse and the unwanted gift, now feeling like a prop in a performance rather than a mother celebrating her daughter's birth. Grandma, can I come over tomorrow? Haley asked suddenly. I need help with my art project. Before I could answer, Samantha interjected. Honey, Grandma's going to be busy getting her medical evaluation. Remember we talked about this? Tyler stood abruptly. I'm getting some air. He stalked toward the restaurant exit, shoulders rigid. I made my goodbyes with mechanical pleasantness, accepting Samantha's cool cheek kiss and Wesley's patronizing pat on my shoulder. The drive home passed in a blur of hurt and confusion, my mind replaying the lunch conversation, searching for clues I might have missed. As I pulled into my driveway, the weight of what had happened finally descended fully. My own daughter had publicly announced plans to place me in a nursing home, speaking about me as if I were already incapable of making decisions or participating in the conversation about my future. I sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, before I gathered the strength to go inside. The house I'd maintained for 40 years welcomed me with familiar silence. I placed my keys in the ceramic dish by the door, hung my cardigan in the closet, and moved through my evening routine with deliberate focus. Only when I was preparing for bed did I allow myself to cry silent tears that fell onto the quilt Frank and I had received as a wedding gift. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined, not just Samantha's words but the careful planning that must have preceded them. This had not been a spontaneous suggestion but a calculated campaign. I fell asleep wondering how the child I had sacrificed everything for could now view me as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to whatever she and Wesley were planning. The next morning, I reached for my purse to retrieve my reading glasses and discovered a glossy brochure I hadn't placed there. Sunny Meadows Assisted Living, Where Care Meets Comfort proclaimed the cover, featuring smiling elderly residents engaged in supervised activities. Flipping it open, I found a business card paperclip to a page highlighting the memory care unit. The card belonged to Diane Reynolds, admissions coordinator, with a handwritten note. Consultation appointment confirmed for Thursday, 2 p.m. I had made no such appointment. Further investigation revealed a second item. An appointment card for Dr. Phillips scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. The description read Cognitive and Competency Evaluation, a type of assessment I had never discussed with my physician. My hands trembled as I set these items on my kitchen table. Someone had placed them in my purse during the birthday lunch, most likely while I visited the restroom. The implications were chilling. This wasn't merely a suggestion or concern about my well-being, but an active plan already in motion. I spent the morning researching online, learning the disturbing details of what was required to force someone into assisted living against their will. The phrase declaration of incompetence appeared repeatedly, along with guardianship and power of attorney. Most states required medical documentation of significant cognitive impairment or inability to care for oneself. Some required court hearings where the elderly person could contest the proceedings. Elderly. The word felt foreign applied to myself. Yes, I was 68, but I lived independently, maintained my home, drove safely, managed my finances, and engaged in regular social activities. My occasional forgetfulness was normal age-related change, not dementia. My arthritis limited some activities, but hardly rendered me helpless. At noon, Eleanor called, her voice tight with concern. "Virginia, are you all right? I've been worried since I heard about the lunch yesterday." "You heard already? From whom?" "Rebecca Winters. She's my neighbor's cousin." She was quite disturbed by what happened. I invited Eleanor over, needing a friendly face. She arrived 30 minutes later bearing a casserole and righteous indignation. "It's worse than I thought," she said after I showed her the brochure and appointment card. "Samantha came by my house last week, asking if I'd noticed concerning behaviors from you. She suggested you might have left your car running in the driveway overnight." "That's absurd," I said. "I've never done any such thing." Eleanor's expression turned grim. "Virginia, there's something else you should know. I ran into Wesley at the supermarket yesterday morning before the lunch. He was on his phone discussing property values in your neighborhood. I distinctly heard him say, 'Once we sell her place, we'll have enough to clear our mortgage and renovate the kitchen.' The implication struck me like a physical blow. They want to declare me incompetent to gain control of my house." "I think so," Eleanor confirmed gently. "And from what Rebecca mentioned about their financial situation, they need the money. Apparently, Wesley made some poor investments last year. I thought of my home, purchased with Frank when we were newlyweds, the place where Samantha took her first steps and celebrated every birthday until she left for college. The garden I'd tended for decades, the kitchen where I'd taught my grandchildren to bake cookies. All of it viewed now not as my home but as an asset to be liquidated. What about my name on their mortgage? I co-signed when they bought that house." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You're still on it? They never refinanced to remove you." "No." Wesley kept finding reasons to delay. "Then you have leverage," Eleanor said, suddenly animated. "If you're on the mortgage, you have legal standing." After Eleanor left, I called my doctor's office directly, speaking to the receptionist I'd known for years. "Janice, has my daughter Samantha been in contact with Dr. Phillips about me?" A hesitation then. "Virginia, I shouldn't discuss this, but yes. She requested your medical records be sent to a neurological specialist and suggested to Dr. Phillips that he document your memory issues for insurance purposes." "Without my consent? Is that even legal?" No, it's not, Janice confirmed. I refused to send anything without your signed release, and Dr. Phillips told her he would need to evaluate you himself before making any referrals. I thanked her and hung up, my concern deepening. Then my sister Florence called from Arizona, her voice worried. Virginia, is everything all right? Samantha called me yesterday talking about your declining condition and asking if I could contribute to your care facility costs. What did you tell her? That you sounded perfectly fine when we spoke last week about your garden plans for spring. Virginia, what's going on? I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice cracked when describing the birthday lunch toast. That doesn't sound like the niece I know, Florence said. Has something changed in their financial situation? The question triggered a memory of Tyler mentioning that Wesley had been tense about money lately. Dad's been on the phone with the bank every night, he'd said during our last visit. He and Mom had a big fight about spending. After hanging up with Florence, I drove to my local bank where I've been a customer for 30 years. Barbara Thompson, the manager, welcomed me into her office. Virginia, how can I help you today? I need information about a mortgage I co-signed for my daughter and son-in-law. Barbara typed on her computer, then frowned. You're listed as co-borrower on the property at 47 Maple Hills Drive. The account is currently problematic. Meaning? They've missed 2 payments in the last 6 months and made 3 others after the grace period. 1 more late payment will trigger default proceedings. The picture was becoming clearer. Samantha and Wesley were in financial trouble, possibly serious enough to risk foreclosure. My house, fully paid off and in a desirable neighborhood, represented a solution to their problems if they could gain control of it. Barbara lowered her voice. As co-borrower, you have full access to the account information and the ability to make decisions about the loan. Would you like me to print the details for you? I nodded, my mind already forming a plan. And what would happen if I placed a freeze on that mortgage account? Any transactions or payments would require your explicit approval. Nothing could proceed without your signature. Let's do that immediately, I said, straightening my posture. And I'd like to review all my accounts to ensure no one else has access without my knowledge. As Barbara processed my request, I realized the full stakes of what I was facing. This wasn't merely about a nursing home or a house. It was about my autonomy, my dignity, and my right to make my own decisions. If Samantha and Wesley succeeded, I would lose not just my home but control over every aspect of my life, from my daily schedule to my financial resources. The implications extended beyond me. If they were willing to manipulate and deceive to solve their financial problems, what lessons were they teaching Tyler and Haley? What would happen to the grandchildren's college funds I'd established if their parents gained control of my assets? By the time I left the bank, my sadness had transformed into resolve. The mortgage freeze was in place, and I had appointments scheduled with my doctor, a lawyer, and a financial advisor. If Samantha wanted a fight, she would discover that the mother who had worked 2 jobs to raise her still possessed the strength to protect herself, even from her own child. That evening, I sat in my living room surrounded by old photo albums. Pictures of Samantha's childhood spread across my coffee table. Her kindergarten graduation with missing front teeth, her first solo bike ride, Frank teaching her to fish at Lake Minnetonka. I traced my finger over Frank's face, wishing desperately he were here to advise me. What would you do, Frank? I whispered to his smiling image. How did we raise a daughter who could do this? The painful truth was that I faced a choice no parent should ever have to make. Protect myself from my own child or risk losing everything I'd worked for my entire life. The evidence of Samantha and Wesley's plan was undeniable, but taking action meant acknowledging their betrayal completely. The next morning I called Richard Palmer, a retired lawyer who had been Frank's friend since college. He agreed to meet me for coffee at my house that afternoon. Virginia, it's been too long, he said, accepting the cup I offered. At 70, Richard remained sharp, his legal mind undiminished by retirement. I laid out the situation methodically, showing him the nursing home brochure, the unauthorized medical appointment, and the bank statements demonstrating my co-borrower status on Samantha's mortgage. Richard's expression grew increasingly grave. This is elder abuse, Virginia. Financial exploitation and attempt to deprive you of your rights. She's my daughter, Richard. Which makes it worse, not better. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. You have several options. The most aggressive would be filing for a protective order and reporting this to Adult Protective Services. The thought made me physically ill. I don't want to take legal action against Samantha. I just want to stop this plan and make her understand she can't treat me this way. Richard nodded thoughtfully. Then we need a strategic approach that gives you leverage without destroying your relationship completely. First, you need comprehensive documentation of your competence. He outlined a plan. Complete neurological and cognitive testing with an independent specialist, updated financial records showing my careful management, and witness statements regarding my daily functioning. And maintain that mortgage freeze, he advised. That's your strongest immediate protection. After Richard left, I called my financial advisor Thomas Bailey and scheduled an appointment for the following day. Thomas had helped me plan for retirement and manage my modest investments for the past decade. Virginia, I've been meaning to call you, he said when I arrived at his office. Samantha contacted me last week asking about your accounts. My stomach tightened. What did she want to know? Everything. Balances, beneficiaries, withdrawal penalties. I explained I couldn't share that information without your authorization. He hesitated. She mentioned becoming your power of attorney due to cognitive concerns. Thomas pulled up my financial records on his computer. Your accounts are in excellent order. You've never missed a payment, overdrawn your accounts, or made any unusual transactions. In fact, your financial management is better than most clients 20 years younger. He printed several reports documenting my financial activity over the past 5 years. If anyone questions your competence, these records speak for themselves. As we reviewed my portfolio, Thomas mentioned something that caught my attention. Wesley's investment firm has been having trouble. Several clients lost significant amounts in a development project that failed to secure proper permits. There are rumors of possible litigation. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Wesley's financial problems might extend beyond their mortgage. That evening, my neighbor Ruth Jackson knocked on my door. Ruth had lived across the street for 30 years and watched Samantha grow up. Virginia, I saw Samantha and Wesley driving past your house yesterday evening, very slowly, like they were checking on something. They didn't stop to visit. Ruth poured herself some tea and continued. Last month, Samantha asked me if I'd noticed any concerning behaviors from you. She specifically asked if I'd seen you looking confused while getting your mail, or if you'd ever wandered outside in your night clothes. What did you tell her? That you're more put together at 68 than I am at 65, and that her questions seemed inappropriate. Ruth set down her cup firmly. Virginia, my sister went through this with her son. He tried to sell her house out from under her to cover his gambling debts. If you need a character witness, I'm available. By Friday, I had completed a thorough neurological examination with Dr. Carter, a specialist with no connection to Samantha. His assessment was clear. No indication of cognitive impairment beyond normal age-related changes. Patient demonstrates excellent executive function, memory appropriate for age, and full decision-making capacity. I also had documentation from my regular physician, my financial records, and statements from 5 different friends and neighbors regarding my independence and functionality. The final step was hardest. Deciding exactly how to confront Samantha. I could simply call and tell her I knew everything, but that might allow her to create more elaborate lies. I could involve the grandchildren, but that seemed unfair to them. I could wait for her to make the next move, but that would leave her with the initiative. After much consideration, I decided on a direct but controlled confrontation. I would use the mortgage freeze as leverage, forcing Samantha and Wesley to address their true motivations. The thought of potentially damaging my relationship with my daughter permanently made my heart ache, but the alternative was worse. As I prepared for bed that night, I paused before the mirror, studying my reflection. Gray hair, lines around my eyes and mouth, hands slightly gnarled from arthritis. Yes, I was aging, but I was still very much myself. Still Virginia Wilson, a woman who had overcome widowhood, raised a child alone, educated herself, maintained a career, and built a secure retirement through careful planning. I would not be reduced to an inconvenient elderly burden to be warehoused for financial convenience. You raised her better than this, I told my reflection. And now you need to remind her of that fact. The next morning, I formally submitted a request for all my medical and financial documents, established a new power of attorney naming my sister Florence rather than Samantha as my agent, and prepared myself for the battle ahead. The mortgage freeze I had implemented would likely trigger a reaction soon, possibly by the end of the month when their next payment was due. I had made my choice. I would fight for my autonomy, not just for myself but for the principle that aging doesn't diminish one's right to self-determination. If Samantha had financial problems, we could discuss solutions that didn't involve sacrificing my independence. But first, she would need to approach me with honesty rather than manipulation. As I closed my planning notebook, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The hurt remained, but beneath it grew a steely resolve. I had survived losing Frank. I had raised a child alone while working multiple jobs. I had paid off my mortgage through decades of careful budgeting. This challenge, painful as it was, would not defeat me either. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. On Monday morning, my phone rang just after 9. Wesley's name appeared on the caller ID, unusual since he rarely contacted me directly. Virginia. His voice sounded tight, controlled anger vibrating beneath his professional tone. There seems to be some issue with our mortgage payment. The bank says you've placed a freeze on the account. There must be some mistake. I kept my voice calm.
No mistake, Wesley.
I've exercised my right as co-borrower to temporarily freeze transactions on that account. A moment of stunned silence followed. You can't do that. Actually, I can. As you and Samantha seem to have forgotten, I'm legally tied to that mortgage. Any decisions affecting it require my consent. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. I'm calling the bank right now to sort this out. Feel free, I replied. Barbara Thompson is expecting your call. She can explain the legal details of a co-borrower agreement. Wesley's tone changed, becoming falsely conciliatory. Virginia, if you're upset about something, we should discuss it as a family. This financial maneuver is unnecessary and, frankly, harmful to all of us, including your grandchildren. I agree we need a family discussion, I said. Why don't you and Samantha come by my house this evening at 6? We can address everything then. He agreed reluctantly and hung up. Less than 10 minutes later, Samantha called. Mom, what are you doing? Her voice trembled with anger. Wesley says you've frozen our mortgage account. Do you have any idea how serious this is? I do, I answered. Just as I understand how serious it is to schedule medical evaluations for someone without their knowledge or consent, or to discuss selling their home while they're still living in it. The line went silent for several seconds. What are you talking about? We'll discuss everything this evening at 6, I said firmly. Please come prepared to be honest, Samantha. I've already gathered quite a lot of information. Mom, if this is about the nursing home suggestion, you're overreacting. We're concerned about your well-being, that's all. 6 o'clock, I repeated and ended the call. I spent the afternoon preparing. I arranged all my documentation in labeled folders on the dining room table. I asked Richard Palmer to be available by phone if legal questions arose. Most importantly, I centered myself emotionally, determined to remain calm regardless of how heated the discussion became. At precisely 6, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Samantha alone, her expression a mixture of indignation and unease. Wesley's parking the car, she explained, brushing past me into the house. She wore her work clothes, an expensive gray suit that projected authority. Mom, we need to resolve this immediately. The mortgage payment is due, and your little stunt could affect our credit rating. Hello to you too, Samantha, I said, closing the door. Would you like some coffee? I don't want coffee. I want you to call the bank and remove this freeze. Wesley entered then, his tall frame filling the doorway. Unlike Samantha, he had changed from work clothes into casual attire, perhaps attempting to appear more approachable. Virginia, he nodded curtly. Let's discuss this reasonably. I led them to the dining room where my folders were arranged. Please sit down. We have much to discuss. They exchanged glances before taking seats across from me. I remained standing, drawing on my years as a teacher to project calm authority. I know about your plans, I began, opening the first folder. I know about the unauthorized medical evaluation you scheduled, the nursing home you've selected, and your conversations with my doctor, my financial advisor, my friends, and even my sister, all designed to build a case that I'm incompetent. Samantha's face flushed. That's not fair. We're concerned about you living alone. You've been forgetting things, leaving the stove on. I have never left the stove on, I stated firmly. That's a fabrication, as is the story about me missing doctor's appointments or wandering outside in my nightclothes. I've spoken with everyone you approached, Samantha. None of them corroborated these supposed incidents because they never happened. I placed Dr. Carter's neurological evaluation on the table. I've been examined by an independent specialist. His assessment confirms what I already know. I'm perfectly competent to manage my own affairs. Wesley leaned forward, shifting tactics. Virginia, regardless of tests, living alone at your age presents risks. We're thinking of your safety. Are you? I asked, opening another folder. Or are you thinking of this? I slid across printed screenshots of their mortgage account showing missed and late payments. You're 3 late payments away from foreclosure proceedings. According to county records, your property value has decreased due to the new highway construction. You're underwater on your mortgage, owing more than the house is currently worth. Wesley's face darkened. You had no right to access our financial information. I had every right. My name is on that mortgage. I'm legally liable for it. I pulled out another document. Just as I had the right to request these property valuation estimates for my home, which show it could sell for approximately $450,000 in the current market. Samantha stood abruptly. This is absurd. You're twisting everything to make us look terrible when we're trying to help you. By declaring me incompetent and selling my home? I asked quietly. By using those proceeds to clear your mortgage and fund your kitchen renovation? Yes, Wesley, I know about that conversation too. Wesley rose now, his professional facade cracking. You've been spying on us? Having us followed?
No.
People talk, especially in small communities. Your financial problems aren't as private as you think. The front door opened suddenly and Tyler appeared, followed by Haley. Dad? Your car's blocking the driveway. He stopped short, sensing the tension. What's going on? Nothing, Samantha said quickly. Adult conversation. Wait outside. No, I countered. They should stay. This affects them too. Mom, Samantha protested. Tyler moved further into the room, Haley following cautiously. Grandma, are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Your parents and I are discussing some important matters. Wesley attempted to regain control. Virginia, involving the children is inappropriate. This is between the adults. Is it? I looked directly at Samantha. You involved them when you announced at your birthday lunch that I needed to be in a nursing home. You involved them when you told them I couldn't help with art projects because of a medical evaluation I never agreed to. Haley's eyes widened. Mom said you were sick and couldn't remember things anymore. I'm not sick, Haley, I said gently. I have arthritis, which makes my hands hurt sometimes, and occasionally I forget small things like where I put my glasses. That's normal for someone my age. Wesley moved toward the children. This isn't appropriate. You two wait in the car. No, Tyler said firmly, surprising everyone. At 15, he rarely challenged his father directly. I want to hear this. Grandma's been acting normal every time I see her. You and Mom are the ones acting weird, whispering about her all the time. Samantha made one more attempt. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. We suggested the nursing home because we love you. Then explain this, I said, revealing the final document, a printout of an email Wesley had sent to the Sunny Meadows nursing home. It detailed their plan to sell my house to cover the costs of my care, with the excess funds to be managed by family. Eleanor's son worked in IT and had helped me recover this deleted message from the facility's records. Wesley paled. Where did you get that? That's private correspondence. Not when it concerns illegal financial exploitation. I finally sat down, feeling the emotional toll of the confrontation. I've consulted with a lawyer. What you're attempting constitutes elder abuse under state law. I have enough evidence to file for a protective order against both of you. You wouldn't, Samantha whispered, her composure finally breaking. We're your family. Which is why I haven't done it yet, I acknowledged. Instead, I'm offering conditions for resolving this situation. I outlined my terms clearly. They would admit their true financial motivations, attend family counseling to rebuild trust, and create a legitimate financial plan that didn't involve appropriating my assets. In return, I would help them restructure their mortgage payments through a program Richard had suggested. And the account freeze? Wesley demanded. Remains until we have a signed agreement, and you've attended at least 3 counseling sessions. Samantha sank back into her chair, tears finally breaking through. Mom, you don't understand. We're drowning in debt. Wesley's firm lost a major client, our mortgage rate adjusted upward, and the kids' private school tuition increased. I understand financial pressure, I said, softening slightly. What I don't understand is why you chose deception over simply asking for help. Would you have given us $450,000? Wesley challenged. Of course not. That's my home and my security. But I would have helped you find solutions that didn't involve destroying my independence. Tyler stepped forward. Dad, is it true? Were you going to put Grandma in a nursing home to get her house? Wesley couldn't meet his son's eyes. It's complicated, Tyler. Adult finances are complex. It's not complicated, Haley said unexpectedly. It's wrong. The room fell silent. Samantha wiped her eyes, the careful makeup from her workday now smudged. Wesley stared at the documents spread across the table, his defensive anger deflating. What happens if we refuse your conditions? He finally asked. Then tomorrow morning, I file for a protective order, remove myself from your mortgage through legal channels, and you face the consequences of your financial decisions without my assistance. Samantha looked up, her expression showing the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in months. Fear. You'd let us lose our house? You were willing to take mine, I reminded her gently. The difference is, you have options I'm offering to help with. You plan to leave me with none. The confrontation continued for another hour, moving through denial, anger, bargaining, and finally reluctant acceptance. Wesley made one final attempt to intimidate me with threats of lawsuits, but I calmly showed him Richard Palmer's assessment of their legal vulnerability. You have until Friday to decide, I concluded, gathering my documents. I suggest you use that time to consider what kind of example you want to set for Tyler and Haley. As they prepared to leave, Haley broke away from her parents and rushed to hug me tightly. I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't know. It's not your fault, sweetheart, I assured her, returning the embrace. Tyler approached more slowly, his adolescent awkwardness at war with his emotions. Can I still come over on Saturdays to read? My door is always open to you, I promised. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, emotionally exhausted but resolute. The confrontation had gone as well as could be expected, and for the first time in months, the truth was fully in the open. Whatever happened next, I had stood my ground and protected what was mine. Not just my property but my dignity and autonomy. Frank would have been proud. 3 days passed without word from Samantha or Wesley. I maintained my normal routine, tending my garden, meeting Eleanor for lunch, and speaking with Florence daily by phone. The silence from my daughter hurt, but I refused to break it. The next move needed to be hers. On Thursday afternoon, Richard Palmer called. Virginia, Wesley contacted me this morning. He'd like to meet tomorrow to discuss your proposed agreement. Did he indicate whether they're accepting my terms? Not explicitly, but he asked detailed questions about the mortgage assistance program I mentioned. That suggests they're considering it. We arranged to meet at Richard's home office the following day at 2 o'clock. I spent that evening reviewing my documentation once more and preparing emotionally for another difficult conversation. When I arrived at Richard's colonial-style house, I was surprised to find only Wesley waiting in the sitting room. He stood as I entered, his usual confidence diminished. Samantha couldn't get away from work, he explained, though we both knew that was likely an excuse. She's authorized me to negotiate on our behalf. Richard guided us to his office where documents were already arranged on his desk. I've prepared a draft agreement based on Virginia's conditions. Shall we review it? The agreement was straightforward. I would assist them with a mortgage modification program that could lower their monthly payments in exchange for their written acknowledgement of their actions and commitment to family counseling. The mortgage account freeze would be lifted after 3 counseling sessions and their first restructured payment. Wesley read through it slowly, asking occasional clarifying questions. The corporate attorney had re-emerged, analyzing terms and implications. This says nothing about financial assistance beyond the mortgage program, he noted. That's correct, Richard confirmed. Virginia is not offering direct financial support. Wesley frowned. That may not be sufficient to resolve our situation. It's more than you deserve, I said quietly, and significantly more than you plan to offer me. He had the grace to look ashamed. After another moment of consideration, he signed the agreement. Samantha will need to sign as well. Of course, Richard said, taking the document. Once both signatures are in place, we can proceed with the mortgage modification application. As we prepared to leave, Wesley paused. Virginia, for what it's worth, this wasn't my idea initially. Samantha was genuinely concerned about your memory lapses. Were there actual lapses, Wesley, or convenient interpretations to justify what you both wanted? He didn't answer directly. Things got out of hand. When we realized how much equity was in your house, it seemed like a solution to everything. Except for what would happen to me, I pointed out. He nodded slowly. I realize that now. Tyler hasn't spoken to me since Monday. He says he's disgusted by what we tried to do. Children often have clearer moral vision than adults, I observed. Perhaps you should listen to him. Samantha signed the agreement that evening, sending it back with Wesley rather than delivering it personally. Her avoidance spoke volumes about her emotional state, likely a mixture of embarrassment, resentment, and possibly genuine remorse. The following week, we had our first family counseling session with Dr. Marion Jenkins, a therapist specializing in family conflicts. The session was as difficult as I had anticipated. Samantha alternated between defensive justification and tearful apologies, while Wesley maintained a more controlled demeanor, acknowledging their poor judgment without fully accepting responsibility. We were desperate, Samantha explained. The business losses, the increased mortgage rate, the children's activities. Desperation doesn't justify deception, Dr. Jenkins observed calmly. Especially when directed at a parent who has historically been supportive. Tyler and Haley participated in the second half of the session. Their perspectives proved powerful, particularly Tyler's direct question to his parents. Would you have done this to Grandpa Frank if he were still alive? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. We all knew Frank's more assertive personality would likely have prevented such a scheme from progressing. I miss him, Samantha said suddenly, tears flowing freely. Dad would have helped us figure things out. I would have helped too, I reminded her gently. If you had asked honestly instead of plotting behind my back. Dr. Jenkins guided us through an exercise identifying healthier communication patterns and boundary setting. By the end of the session, we had established a framework for rebuilding trust gradually through transparent conversations and respectful behavior. The mortgage modification process proceeded simultaneously. Thomas Bailey helped us complete the necessary paperwork, and by the 3rd week, their application had been approved, reducing their monthly payment by nearly $600. Our second counseling session proved more productive. Samantha finally acknowledged the full extent of their deception, including the deliberate exaggeration of my occasional forgetfulness. I convinced myself you needed help, she admitted. But I was really justifying what we wanted to do financially. Why not just ask me for a loan? I questioned. Or discuss your financial situation openly? Pride, Wesley acknowledged. And knowing a loan wouldn't be enough. We needed a substantial sum to correct our financial position. We also knew what we were doing was wrong, Samantha added quietly. Asking directly would have forced us to admit that. Haley, who had remained relatively quiet through most sessions, suddenly spoke up. I knew Grandma was fine. I told you that, Mom, but you wouldn't listen. You were right, Samantha admitted. reaching for her daughter's hand. I should have listened. By our third session, enough progress had been made that I felt comfortable lifting the mortgage account freeze as agreed. Wesley confirmed their first modified payment had been processed successfully. We've also been working with Thomas on a debt reduction plan, he added. Selling one of our cars and cutting back on several expenses. The grandchildren's reactions throughout this process revealed much about their characters. Tyler maintained a certain distance from his parents, his teenage sense of justice offended by their actions. During our private moments, he expressed his disappointment. I always thought Mom and Dad were good people, he confided during a Saturday visit to my house. Now I don't know what to think. They are good people who made very bad choices, I told him. Part of growing up is realizing parents are flawed humans who sometimes fail to live up to their own values. Haley processed the situation differently, becoming more protective of me while still maintaining her connection with her parents. She began calling me daily just to check in, and insisted on helping with household tasks during visits, despite my assurances that I could manage. The most emotional moment came during our fourth counseling session, when Dr. Jenkins asked each person to express what they had learned from the experience. Samantha went last, her voice steady despite her tears. I've learned that desperation doesn't justify betrayal, especially of someone who has always supported you. Mom, what we tried to do was unforgivable. And yet you've offered us a path forward instead of the legal consequences we deserved. She reached for my hand tentatively. I don't expect immediate forgiveness, but I hope eventually we can rebuild what I damaged. I squeezed her hand gently. We already have begun. As we left that session, Tyler walked beside me to my car. Grandma, are you really okay with what happened? Because I'm still angry. Holding on to anger hurts you more than them, I told him. I'm not forgetting what happened, but I'm choosing to focus on healing rather than punishment. You're stronger than I would be, he observed. You'll find your strength when you need it, I assured him. Just as I did. By the end of 2 months, we had established a new family dynamic. The easy trust of before was gone, replaced by something more cautious but also more honest. Samantha and Wesley adhered strictly to our agreement, attending every counseling session and following through on their financial restructuring plan. We created a legal document clarifying that my home would remain my property exclusively until my death, after which it would be sold and the proceeds divided equally between Samantha and my sister Florence's children, removing any financial incentive for future manipulation. Most importantly, we began having regular family discussions about needs and boundaries, creating space for honest communication that had been missing before the crisis. The road to complete reconciliation would be long, but we had taken the first crucial steps. 6 months after the confrontation, I hosted Sunday dinner at my home, something that had once been routine but now carried new significance. The autumn afternoon sun streamed through my dining room windows as I arranged a bouquet of dahlias from my garden. Need any help, Grandma? Haley asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway. You could set the table, sweetheart, I suggested, handing her the good plates we use for special occasions. Tyler arrived next, carrying a science textbook. I got an A on that biology project you helped me with, he announced proudly. Wonderful. I knew you would. Samantha and Wesley arrived last, bearing a homemade apple pie and a bottle of wine. The subtle change in their demeanor was noticeable. Gone was the patronizing concern and controlling behavior, replaced by a more genuine respect. Mom, the garden looks beautiful, Samantha commented as she placed the pie on the counter. Those new rose bushes really filled in nicely. They did. Eleanor and I are thinking of entering the neighborhood garden competition next spring. Wesley helped me carry dishes to the table, his movements careful around my arthritis. Virginia, Thomas mentioned you've been volunteering at the community center's financial literacy program? 3 days a week, I confirmed, teaching young adults basic budgeting and investment principles, something many schools neglect. Including ours, apparently, he acknowledged with a self-deprecating smile. As we settled around the table, I observed the new dynamic that had developed between us. The boundaries were clearer now, the conversations more authentic. We had weathered a terrible storm and emerged changed but intact. The weekly counseling sessions had continued for 3 months before transitioning to monthly check-ins. Dr. Jenkins had guided us through difficult conversations about respect, autonomy, and the changing parent-child relationship as both generations aged. Samantha and Wesley had fully committed to their financial recovery plan. They had sold their second car and Wesley's boat, reduced discretionary spending significantly, and Wesley had secured a new position with better long-term stability. Samantha had been promoted to executive director at her firm, bringing an increase in salary that helped their situation further. "Tyler's looking at colleges already," Samantha mentioned as we enjoyed the meal. "He's interested in pre-law programs." "Really?" I looked at my grandson with newfound understanding of his career interest. He nodded. "I've been thinking about elder law specifically. There are a lot of people who don't have someone to stand up for them." The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Our family crisis had inspired a potential career path focused on preventing similar situations for others. My relationship with Eleanor had deepened through this experience as well. We had joined a senior advocacy group together, attending monthly meetings where we learned about resources for maintaining independence and protecting against exploitation. I had shared my story anonymously, helping others recognize warning signs I had initially missed. "Mom," Samantha said as we cleared the dinner dishes, "Wesley and I have been talking. We've fixed up our guest house in the backyard. It has its own entrance and kitchen. If you ever decide you want to downsize, it's yours. No pressure, just an option." In the past, such an offer might have been part of a manipulation strategy. Now, I could consider it as a genuine invitation. "Thank you, but I'm happy where I am," I replied. "My garden, my neighbors, my routines all give me purpose. When that changes, if it changes, we can revisit the conversation." Samantha nodded, accepting my decision without argument. "I understand. I just want you to know the option exists." Later, as we enjoyed coffee and pie in the living room, Wesley raised an unexpected topic. "Virginia, I've been meaning to thank you for not taking legal action against us. You would have been justified. Legal consequences wouldn't have restored our relationship," I said simply. "And despite everything, that remained my priority." "We didn't deserve your restraint," he acknowledged. "Perhaps not. But family relationships aren't about deserving. They're about choosing to remain connected even through difficult times." Haley, curled beside me on the sofa, looked up. "Grandma, will you teach me to make your strawberry jam next summer? Mom says yours is better than anything from the store." "I'd love to," I promised, touched by this request to pass down a family tradition. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The betrayal had cut deeply, but the healing process had created something valuable. My relationship with Samantha would never return to what it had been. But perhaps this new, more honest connection was healthier for both of us. I had discovered strength I hadn't known I possessed. The quiet teacher who had always avoided conflict had found her voice when it mattered most. More importantly, I had maintained my dignity and independence while still offering compassion to those who had tried to take it from me. When they prepared to leave, Samantha lingered behind the others. "Mom, I've been thinking about Dad lately. What would he have thought about all this?" "He would have been deeply disappointed in the choices you made," I said honestly. "But he would have been proud of how you've worked to make amends." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I miss his guidance. He always said the true measure of character isn't avoiding mistakes, but how you respond to them. I'm trying to live up to that," she said quietly. "I know. And that's why we're here together now." After they departed, I sat in my favorite chair watching the sunset through my living room window. The house felt peaceful rather than empty. I had fought for this space, this independence, this life I had built. The victory wasn't in keeping my home, but in establishing that aging didn't diminish my right to make my own choices. The next day, Samantha called to invite me to dinner at their house the following weekend. "And Mom? I was wondering if you'd help me plant a garden this spring. Nothing elaborate, just some vegetables and flowers. I've never had your green thumb." "I'd be happy to," I told her, recognizing the invitation as another small step in rebuilding trust. When Eleanor called later to check in, I shared the events of the Sunday dinner. "It sounds like progress," she observed. Do you think you'll ever completely trust them again? Complete trust may not be possible, I admitted. But we're finding a new way forward that respects everyone's needs and boundaries. You know, Eleanor said thoughtfully, when we were first dealing with this situation, you worried that standing up to Samantha might destroy your relationship permanently. It seems like the opposite happened. Yes, I agreed. Sometimes setting firm boundaries is the most loving thing you can do, even when it feels like the hardest. I declined Samantha's later invitation to move into their guest house, just as I declined a similar suggestion from Florence to relocate to Arizona. My independence remained precious to me, hard-won and fiercely protected. When I eventually needed assistance, I would accept it on my terms, not because someone else decided I was incapable. The lesson I carried forward from this experience wasn't about distrust or vigilance, but about the importance of maintaining one's voice at every stage of life. Aging brings changes, some unwelcome, but it doesn't diminish our right to self-determination. As Virginia Wilson, I had earned my independence through decades of hard work and careful planning. While I would always be Samantha's mother, I had learned that sometimes loving means standing your ground, even against those you love most. In protecting myself, I had ultimately protected the true meaning of family: respect, honesty, and the courage to face difficult truths together. What would you do if a family member tried to take control of your life or assets? Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love to protect yourself? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found my story helpful or inspiring, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who might benefit from hearing that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening, and remember that your age doesn't determine your worth or your right to make your own choices.